So kind of what you're talking about is, again, it's a new model of thinking, right? And adopting new technologies. And it's really looking at things through a form-based code instead of a use regulation, which is what zoning more is. And as we've gone through this process, as I said, 70s and 80s, we originally adopted regulations that essentially outlawed the little downtowns that we loved. And what people have learned over time is that if we really focus on the form, if you go out and measure the form of your neighborhood and allow for that to be built, that's where you get back to the quality of the development and the form that feels like home and feels like a community.
But can you define that a little bit for people who aren't familiar?
Sure. So for example, in different neighborhoods in Nashua, and there's two parts I want to get to here. You can go out and you could look on a neighborhood in the core downtown, right? Nashua was originally a mill city, and you could look and you could literally, or in aerial photography, you can literally draw a line, and the whole neighborhood has porches that are 6 feet from the sidewalk, right? And so you have an area that is more of a build to line instead of a setback, saying that all development in this neighborhood to match the form of this neighborhood needs to be built to within 0 and 10 feet of the front setback line, but preferably along this 6-foot line that matches the form of the neighborhood, right? We're less concerned with the frontage or the setback. We want you to build to the line that forms with the neighborhood, right? So focusing on the form. We're also less concerned than if how many units are in that building, as long as the building feels the same to the person who's driving down the street or walks down the street. So with form-based codes, you regulate the public space, and what happens behind private is private. And you do that to make a form that feels comfortable.
That's interesting. So you're saying that communities could say, instead of saying, well, we won't allow multi-family unit, or we won't allow residential above retail here, as long as the building looks in character with the rest of the neighborhood, as long as it fits visually on the outside, you can kind of do with it what you want on the inside. Is that more or less what we're talking about?
That's, yes, a very high level of what we're talking about. So in Nashua, in our downtown zone, we have that flexibility. We have some basic standards that talk about what you have to meet. And if you meet all these standards, you don't go to planning board. You skip that and go directly to building permit process. And we've been using that pretty successfully. Especially just in the last year or two, we have more and more properties coming in like that, because much of our downtown, number one, is set, right? It's already paved. There's not a lot of changes that need to happen. And a lot of those properties were built before we had zoning, and before we had site plans, and to subject them to a whole process of planning board review for what's already on the ground and existing, which is our Main Street, is what people love. It's all unnecessary. Right. And so if you can meet the form that's there, and you can meet facade standards, right? I mean, we know some basic things, facade standards. We don't want a 100-foot long brick wall, right? You can't fill in all the windows. That would not work. That doesn't feel safe. It doesn't feel like it's a good part of the public space. But if you can meet the basic standards that make it feel like that part of the neighborhood, then you can go right to building permit, and you don't have to go through that public hearing process and public process.